Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Thank you for joining me for folks' favorite Fandom Friday. Now, every Friday, I get the chance to visit with somebody from the wider world of the Tolkien fandom. Writers and musicians, artists, craftsmen, scholars, content creators, and a lot more. Today, I'm pleased to introduce you to two incredible contributors to the Tolkien fandom and Tolkien academia. Now, together, they curated the breathtaking exhibition at the Haggerty Museum of Art at Marquette University, J.R.R. Tolkien, The Art of the Manuscript. Folks who attended the Prancing Pony podcast Moot in 2022 got to see that exhibition, and I know that for me, it remains one of the most powerful experiences I've had in the world of Tolkien. Now, Dr. Sarah Schaefer is an art historian at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and Dr. Bill Fliss is the Tolkien archivist at Marquette University. So, folks, please join me in welcoming Bill and Sarah to today's Tolkien Times. Now, I think the first question I have to ask is about that amazing exhibition. It seems to have been an incredible success, both in terms of people visiting the exhibit and in sales of the exhibition catalog, which quickly had to go to a reprint. The exhibit felt like a love letter to Tolkien and to those who study his work academically and to those who are simply fans of the work. But what did it mean to you as co-curators?
Well, for me, the exhibition started not as my idea, but as something was kind of thrust on me. So I have to admit, at first I want to say I was resentful, but it was sort of like something that was given to me to do. But I found over time, I really it became one of the most rewarding professional experiences I've ever had. It was just wonderful to work on. I really felt like. Psychologically and emotionally, I sort of took ownership of it for myself, and I was very pleased with how it turned out. And being able to work with Sarah was a real joy, and it really did help connect me more to the fandom because it was a avenue for encountering a lot of wonderful fans and interacting with them, and just enjoying this world of Tolkien.
It was not thrust upon me as it was on Bill. It was more me kind of thrusting myself into the project when that became a possibility. And it really was a chance happenstance, if chance you would call it, as Bill likes to say. And yeah, sort of coming into it as an art historian, I've been a longtime Tolkien fan, but never thought that my sort of academic work and my fandom would meet and converge in this way. So just, in short, thinking about it as like what it means to me, it meant probably more as a professional and personal experience than anything I've ever done. And, when I reflect back on it, I mean, it's been a while since we've talked about the exhibition.
That's true.
And because, it ended over a year ago now. So, but when I reflect back on it, I agree with Bill, like, doing it, but also then when it came to fruition and getting to meet and interact with so many members of the community who I've admired for both long periods of time and shorter periods of time. I mean, honestly, like, I'm not just paying lip service because I'm on here with you right now, but the PPP Moot was really the nexus of that experience in so many ways, like getting to meet you guys and so many people who came to Milwaukee for that experience. Like that was a really special time.
That was. I agree 100%. I mean, to be able to be there and to see it in person was, in many ways, really changed my own experience with the Tolkien fandom as well. I've got to ask, now that it has been a year, you've got a little bit of hindsight behind you. Is there anything that either of you might have done differently? Maybe something you wish you'd included that you hadn't, or some small change. I mean, not so much regrets, but like, I wish there'd been room to put that in.
I mean, luckily I can't speak for Bill, but I don't have any excuse me. I don't have any regrets per se about it. It's just, as you continue to engage with this material, as both Bill and I do, I think your perspective on it evolves. There was one thing that happened right around the time of it coming together in total, which was Simon Tolkien provided a really great sort of introduction and reflection on the exhibition that was printed in the second edition, and there was a video of his remarks that we included at the beginning of the exhibition, and he talked about and read from the book the part where the Scroll of Isildur, where he describes his encounter with the ring, and that was a piece that we kind of considered really early on, but there wasn't anything that was sort of visually really compelling about it that we noted at the time when we were putting together the checklist. So, luckily it is represented in Simon Tolkien's remarks and in the second edition. So, again, don't regret not putting that thing in. And then just subsequently, as I've continued to do research on Tolkien, and I live in Milwaukee, so I get to go and see Bill and see the collection. I won't say whenever I want, because I don't want to take too much of Bill's time and put too many demands on him. But there was one time that I went over to look at just a first edition of The Hobbit, and Bill, being the great archivist that he is, thought, oh, I'll pull out some of the page proofs from The Hobbit, and which were so wonderful to look at. And I hope to look at more things like that as I continue to do research. And that was a moment of sort of like, oh, I wish we had thought to put some of these pages in. But again, we did, I didn't know about them. It didn't come into our discussions, kind of that area of things. But just goes to show that there is still so much to be culled from these manuscripts.
The thing, yeah, there really is. And I suppose that kind of leads into my next question, since there is so much out there that like you said, it's not that you regret not including it, but that maybe you didn't, weren't aware of. Given that, but also given the reality of the challenges of something like this, and the fact that we did have sort of a series of exhibits around the world. We had the Bodleian Library did their exhibit, then there was the tapestries. How likely are we to see any other exhibit along these lines anytime in the near future? Maybe in what remains of my lifetime, let's say.
Well, in the near future, I don't think you'll see any. I know I made the decision after this one that we would do a 5-year moratorium on any loaning of any original items to exhibitions. And I've been approached by a number of places wanting to do things, and I've said no, we're taking a break, which is reasonable, I think.
Yeah, it is. 5 years is not that long. Yeah.
No, it's not that long. And I mean, we have had a slew of exhibitions, and a lot of times people who come here wanting to do exhibitions or wanting to use some of our materials are interested in the same iconic pieces. And it is a accepted practice within museums. We're an archive, not really a museum, but it's still an accepted practice not to have these things constantly out for display. Taking a long break happens all the time. So, and I know that the Tolkien estate was very supportive of the decision, because it's honestly a lot of work. Even if you're not actually just doing the exhibition yourself, but just contributing to an exhibition, there is a lot of planning and paperwork and coordination, a lot of bandwidth, so to speak, that gets taken up with it. So, and then that's true for the estate as well, which has to oversee all of this. So they were, I think, kind of pleased that we were taking a break. And I think the Bodleian has done a similar thing as well. I know that they, I think that they contributed some facsimiles to the exhibition in Italy that was going on. But so at some point, I imagine, there will be in the future Tolkien exhibitions. What form and where, I couldn't say at this point. Within the United States, we've had the wonderful exhibition in New York at the Morgan, and we've had now for the Midwest, you might say, that we've had this exhibition here at the Haggerty at Marquette. And so perhaps somewhere on the West Coast would be the next logical step to sort of.
I sure wouldn't complain about that.
I didn't think you'd be too upset about that idea, but that's a possibility I could see down the road. And I don't know if who knows, maybe there would be partnerships with the Bodleian to kind of go together on different ideas. We'll see.
Okay.
I would just add to that. I mean, it's generally the case that people who are Tolkien fans have an appreciation for the literary and visual manifestations of fantasy more broadly. And I think that the Tolkien exhibitions, and just as younger generations have gotten into the museum field, have gotten into libraries and academia, there's more of a recognition of the value and the demand for these kinds of exhibitions. And, you know, someone like Tolkien will draw huge communities. So there was a great exhibition at the Getty a few years back on the fantasy of the Middle Ages, and they put out a really great exhibition catalog. And we actually worked with the curators there on a symposium. So yeah, even if it's not just a kind of monographic Tolkien exhibition, I think it's fair to say that you will see more museum exhibitions that engage with these materials and topics. And I'm looking forward to seeing those kinds of things too.
Well, the Getty would be a good place to go. I'm really sad to hear that I missed that, because that's not all that far away and it's a beautiful location. We'll have to see what happens in the near future. You know, I'd say that one of the most jaw-dropping things about the exhibit was the research tool that you've been working on, Anduin. Talk to us a little bit about what this means for Tolkien scholars going forward, and maybe how you think it will impact the field of Tolkien studies over the coming years. I think there's a lot of potential there, but I want to hear it from you guys.
Well, I hope it has a great impact. Its origin really was an attempt when I became archivist here and curator of the collection to improve the access to the manuscript collection. And it's got a long, complicated history. I won't take up a lot of time talking about that. But basically, it really was screaming for a reprocessing of all the manuscripts, a reassessment, kind of a putting together the jigsaw puzzle of how the Lord of the Rings was put together. I mean, Christopher Tolkien did amazing work in his History of Middle-earth volumes, which many listeners, I imagine, have heard of or are perhaps familiar with. And
I hope so. I quote from him all the time. So,
So he was a great help, that work in History of Middle-earth, with this work of building the Anduin project, which essentially is a database which allows visitors here at Marquette to navigate through digital scans of the collection and understand how the collection fits together. And prior to this, it was much more fragmented and scattered, and working with it, while it was possible, it was cumbersome. And this really, I think, makes it far more efficient to be able to study the Tolkien manuscripts. So my hope is that it will encourage a closer look at the manuscripts, to go beyond what Christopher did in History of Middle-earth and come and kind of take a closer look and understand how all the pieces come together. And in a way, it's an organic thing, in the sense that I almost look on it as a living entity. It's evolved right now. Where I think we're in our beta version, which is an improvement over the alpha version, but it's going to keep adding new functionalities will be added over time. Some great hopes this year for some new functionalities that'll come online. But also it will be helped by the researchers who interact with it, because they will have the opportunity to leave comments and to, in a way, improve the experience for the people that come after them. So over time, our understanding of it's not like we've got the collection figured out 100% and everything's set. There's still work to do, and so that will
it's always going to be a work in progress in some ways.
Exactly, and then there always will be a level of indeterminacy which will haunt the manuscripts to some degree, because you can't figure out like exactly when every manuscript was written. There's always going to be these fun, and Tolkien, I think, would love that there are these these unsolved puzzles that exist within his literary work, since he dealt with those all the time. As a scholar. So those will always be there, but I think we can improve the understanding of it enormously. So that's essentially what Anduin is, and will continue to be.
Excellent. Well, I know Sarah, you mentioned that you stop by Marquette on a regular basis and try not to take too much of Bill's time. I have a feeling if I lived out there, it would be, it's Thursday, Alan's here again, So I completely understand that. I would love to be able to dive into the Anduin as I dip my toes in it at the exhibit. It's a fantastic resource, I think, for scholars. I mean, obviously it's a little bit, because you do have to be physically in person at Marquette. It's definitely for those who are doing studies. But I think for people who are fans who aren't going to ever make it to Marquette, they'll see the impact of it on Tolkien studies, on papers that they get to hear at moots, on articles that they read in journals and things along those lines. So
I hope really so. And we built it so that it could easily, I mean, very, very easily just be made available with the images to everybody in the world if we wanted to. I mean, if the situation if it ever reached that point where the Tolkien estate was interested in doing that, having that available as a resource online, it would be
wouldn't that
just
be amazing?
Flipping a switch practically.
Oh, it
But
really
it's also
would.
amazing to, I mean, see what people like, Tolkien Collector's Guide are able to do, like with the letters, making this great database that doesn't always reproduce the letters, but tells you what they are. I mean, those are go-to resources for anyone who deals with this stuff. So even for those who can't access Anduin on site, I feel like there will just be these ripple effects that become, immediately apparent, and even more so over time.
And that's a great example of one too, the Tolkien Collector's Guide with the letters guide that they've created, which, we spoke to Phil Walsh about that on a Fandom Friday not too long ago. And, it's just a fantastic project. And like you said, it's that ripple effect immediately, even though those of us who aren't going to get a chance to see Anduin in person are going to feel the impact in the fandom and in Tolkien studies.
And it's such a contrast with the old way of looking at them, which, we included in the exhibition, in part to highlight the work that Bill is doing, but also, as he noted a second ago, how this kind of dovetails with the work that Tolkien himself did as a scholar and academic, as well as a creative writer. Prior to the advent of Anduin, if you wanted to look through these manuscripts in any kind of rapid succession, you had to use microfilm, the microfilm reproductions of them, which are fascinating. I love kind of outdated media forms like that. So in the last section of the exhibition, we included a sort of map, that Bill created of the kind of Anduin. I don't know how you'd describe it. I mean, I've heard Bill describe
architecture, maybe.
Yeah, the architecture of it, to give a sense of kind of how the database actually works, and a preview sort of version of it, as well as microfilm readers where visitors could actually go through these older reproductions, these older surrogates of the manuscript. And it's I always would say, like, it's easy to think, oh, you can zoom in really closely with these new digital reproductions of it, and you'd think that would make reading Tolkien's handwriting easier. Anyone who works with paleography will immediately be like, no, that absolutely is not the case, and it's true. And so, it's kind of simple to think, oh, this is such a revolution, such a technological innovation over the older way of looking at them, but that older form was still really, really valuable. But even just thinking about the fact that it's just single pages in succession, you can't kind of go back and forth with ease. You have to actually rewind and forward, like an old VHS tape or something.
It's a very analog process.
Right.
That is fantastic. And I remember that was part of the experience I got to have, was looking at those at the end of the exhibition. Well, Bill, one more question before we go. It's hard to believe it has been nearly 5 years since we first talked to you about the J.R.R. Tolkien Fandom Oral History project that you've been working on. Clearly, it takes a lot longer to muster 6,000 audio interviews than to muster 6,000 Rohirrim. How is the project coming along? And for those of my listeners who've not yet taken part, where should they go to do so?
Well, the project's going okay. Interviews come in. When I first started the project, there was a deluge of people wanting to do it, and then that turned into a trickle, and then it ebbs and flows based upon some of the places that I'm going to get the interviews, or where there may be announcements. A lot of the people I've been seeing lately, honestly, Alan, are people who are catching up on the old PPP episodes, and they reached that one from 5 years ago, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'd love to do that. I bet you it's done now." And then they go check on our website, and that's a place you could just Google Marquette Tolkien Fandom oral history to bring up a link to the site, and they go, and then they realize, oh, he's still collecting interviews. Yes, and so they'll sign up.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Them. But it's coming along pretty well. This last summer, I traveled to Germany to Tolkien Tag and was able to collect a number of interviews there. That was really cool. I think I need to do a little bit more of that, try to find a way to get out to where the fans are and try to collect them, because it's a slow process, sort of, blowing the horn periodically and waiting for the interviews to come in. It's definitely a slow process. I'll be at this for a while longer.
Well, we'll make sure that we do what we can, to keep bringing people your way. I'll be sure to include a link in the captions in the show notes so people can just click on that and go directly to it.
Thank you. That would be great. Yeah. I would love anybody's voice to join the muster.
Yeah,
I never tired of hearing people's views on Tolkien, and there have been some just fantastic interviews, just really wonderful, just very heartwarming, heart-moving interviews that I've heard over the years.
That's cool. And folks, please, if you have not done this, if you have not taken part, do follow that link. It's not a lengthy process. It's something that you can do with relative ease. You just set up a time and you do the interview and you answer the questions and you're done, and then you're part of the muster. So definitely take part. Well, in the meantime, Sarah, Bill, thank you both so much for joining me here on today's Tolkien Times today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, folks, that is it for today's Fandom Friday, but come back next time for another Fandom Friday to meet another of your fellow Tolkien fans, or maybe more than one, and maybe even learn what niches of the community you might be interested in exploring. And if you're interested in joining me here for a future Fandom Friday, let me know by emailing barnaman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, bonus weekly episodes, and a whole lot more. And join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as we wrap up the week with Silmarillion Saturday. If you're watching this on YouTube, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps, and follow @Tolkien Times on all your social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.